Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Before we get into this, I might not be as high energy. I've just been out this morning, absolutely smashed 5k run, PB at the time of recording this. Pouring down rain, weren't easy. So, I'm just, yeah, feeling good though. Let's do this. So this is Debunking Araki Forgot Extras number 11, which at the time of me recording this is the last one that Hamon Beat has done. If there's any other videos you want me to check out, let me know. But I'll explain the rules one more time. Anything up to Stone Ocean, perfectly fine. If it gets past that, if it gets the steel ball running onwards, I will be pausing, skipping, and potentially ending the video there. I don't want any spoilers for steel ball run onwards. Let's get into this.
Welcome back to another Debunking Araki Forgot Extras, where I go over more JoJo...
Okay. Usually, the bit that I then pause for the thumbnail has got like something that I'm like, that's going to be spoilery, but nothing hinting so far, so this could be interesting.
fan questions that I haven't already covered. It's been a little while, and videos have been slower recently, so I felt like going back once again to the debunking series, since it's still one of the most fun kinds of videos to make. First, we have a question about Phantom Blood. This person asks how Dio was able to develop his body freezing technique to counter Hamon when he didn't know about Hamon until the scene where he first uses it. This is actually related to a scene that was removed by the anime.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
In the manga, there's an additional scene after Jonathan starts training under Zeppeli. Wang Chan appears at night to attack Jonathan, and he is injured by a Zoom punch. Immediately after this, we get a scene with Dio and Jack the Ripper at Midnight's Lot, where Wang Chan shows up with a partially melted face. This is when Dio first learns about Hamon, giving him time to develop a technique to counter it.
Hey, alright, cool. Alright, which is fair, because again, I've not read the manga, so it's always cool to see these questions being asked, then it's like, and then the answer being
While
portrayed.
The anime has a version of the scene in the castle here, the Wang Chan part is cut out entirely, so Dio just seems to decide to freeze his arm on the fly.
Right.
Funnily enough, this whole series of events was actually partially adapted in the Phantom Blood musical. Here, though, while there is a scene of Wang Chan being hit with a Zoom punch, we don't actually see him go tell Dio. Instead, later, when Jack the Ripper is hit with the Sendo wave kick by Zeppeli, he flees to Midnight's Lot to find Dio. Jonathan and the gang show up right after and fight the zombies, but
I'd love to see a JoJo's musical.
During this, we can see Jack and Dio talking in the background. So in this version, that's seemingly where Dio learns about Hamon for the arm freezing scene right after Jack's defeat. Next is a question about Hamon. This comment says that non-living things need to have contact maintained with them for Hamon to be channeled through them, but that the rose, which was cut and no longer alive, was still able to have Hamon in it. There's a couple things wrong here. First of all, the rule is not that non-living things cannot hold Hamon, it's that non-organic things can't hold Hamon. We wouldn't exactly call stuff like oil or Caesar's bubbles alive, but they can hold Hamon without contact since they are made of organic material, unlike something like the plucked sword or the metal chandelier, which require contact to be maintained. But another problem is that a rose doesn't actually die when it's cut. Flowers that are cut are still alive and stay that way for quite a while.
You never, tended to a nice bouquet of flowers when you put them in a vase. You snip the bottom so that they can feed easier and...
Though regardless, a dead flower would still conduct Hamon just the same by being organic. Another question relates to Joseph's fight with Donovan in Part 2. They ask how Joseph was able to conduct Hamon into the cactus when he isn't touching it and is lying on the ground next to it. However, this is not actually when Joseph touched the cactus. Earlier, we see him try to punch Donovan through his cape, but he punches the cactus instead and gets needles in his hand. This is when he touched the cactus and sent Hamon into it, causing it to explode later. Next are some comments about cars being trapped in space and Dio's time in the coffin.
So many people ask about cars in space, why?
First for cars, people point out that on the page describing Ultimate Cars' abilities, it says he can go 100 years without food. If this is the case, how did Cars drift in space for eternity when really he should have starved to death? However, this is a misunderstanding. It isn't saying that Cars will starve no matter what. This is referring to Cars when he's actually operating as a living being. But when Cars was in space, he wasn't expending energy, he was in a dormant state. As we know, Pillar Men can go much longer than 100 years without food, with their hibernation lasting for thousands of years, and that's as normal Pillar Men before becoming the ultimate being. Now for Dio, we have a similar question. People ask how he lasted 100 years without blood. Again, I'd apply the same answer. Dio wasn't doing anything in the coffin, he was lying completely still and not using up energy, so while he would eventually get weaker, he would still be alive as long as his brain wasn't destroyed and could recover as soon as he got more blood. This next one deals with the Undul fight in part 3. They mention the scene where Geb slices the front tires of the group's dune buggy, but that soon after this the wheels reappear with no explanation. Now there's two interpretations of this question, and I'm not sure which one is being asked here. First is that they might be confused as to how the dune buggy is shown driving up to Jotaro at the end despite the wheels just being cut. However, if you look closely, even here it is still missing the front wheels.
Yeah, it's gone.
The buggy is actually driving backwards using the back wheels and dragging the front along.
Yeah, because I suppose what's happened here is the sand being lifted and the wind and the smoke and that is covering the fact that the front wheels aren't there. But the reason it's doing this is because it's dragging along the sand, right? Yeah.
So clearly there's no issue there. The other interpretation is that they're saying that the wheels suddenly reappeared in the next chapter with the start of the Oingo Boingo arc. In this case, this falls into a common thread I see a lot with Araki Forgot Topics, which is treating a larger span of time as if it's instantaneous. Yes, the wheels are back in this arc, but that's after some time had passed.
Yeah, they're not going to just, carry on and not do anything about the fact there's no front wheels.
Giving them time to fix it. They didn't just instantly reappear. There was clearly a change in time and place that can make the repairing of the wheels believable. Next is one about the final battle between Jotaro and Dio. This is actually a question I've seen quite a lot, but I just never got around to answering it. People ask how it was possible for Dio to be killed by a punch to the leg by Jotaro, when as a vampire he should only be vulnerable to Hamon. Well, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding here since this punch isn't actually what killed Dio. If you recall, they later placed Dio's body into the sunlight which destroyed it. Dio wasn't really dead at this point and wouldn't truly die until he was completely destroyed. Part of why we know this is actually if you compare the time of his death with the mutation of the flesh bud of Okuyasu's father. That was said to have happened around 2 p.m. in Japan.
Ah, and that's daytime, so... Hey, ain't that interesting?
People have actually brought this up before, saying it conflicts with the time Kakyoin gave for Japan, which was at night. However, the reason for that is because Dio didn't die until sunrise, which actually lines up with 2 p.m. in Japan. So Dio wasn't killed by the punch, but was just incapacitated. However, some still ask how it's possible for a stand to do this with just a punch to the leg. But it actually makes more sense if we take another look at the fight. First, Jotaro crushes Dio's leg, then he punches the world in the leg. We can see that this clash is so strong that Star Platinum's fist begins to break. However, because Dio's leg was weakened, his stand's leg was weakened as well. So the cracks on his stand spread over the entire body, including his head.
Damn.
The sheer force of the blow caused Dio to basically explode. Now, one of the stated weaknesses of a vampire other than sunlight is also the destruction of their brain.
Yeah.
Dio's brain is pretty resilient since it was able to withstand getting cut in half and stabbed through by Polnareff, but a serious blow to the head could still really mess Dio up. He himself said that if Polnareff had a bit more time, he could have destroyed his brain with Silver Chariot, and the punch to the head he took earlier from Star Platinum was strong enough to make him lose control of his body. So really this final blow emphasizes just how strong Star Platinum is, that even with his strengthened body, he was still hit hard enough to not be able to recover in time before he was finished off by the sun. Now for a part 4 question. This person asks why Koichi didn't just use echoes to put the word help on himself to get Josuke's attention during the Rohan fight. I think what this question is missing is how exactly Koichi was being trapped by Rohan in the first place. As we see here, Koichi wants to ask Josuke for help, but whenever he tries, he just acts like everything is fine. This is because Rohan had written in Koichi that he could not attack Rohan. This doesn't simply mean attacking him physically. He also can't intentionally act in a way that leads Rohan to harm.
Yeah, so
he can't tell them what's wrong.
Yeah, you can't tell anyone else to help because it could eventually, have them attack Rohan or do something.
Either he is unable to talk about Rohan's ability, so doing something with his stand to call for help would similarly be limited by Rohan's command. Next is another one I've actually seen a lot over the years. Some people ask why Jotaro seems surprised that a rat could have a stand when obviously he already knew about Iggy and Forever in part 3. Now, this is a really common question, and I could probably put together a couple dozen times it's been asked. But every time I hear it, I just can't shake the one obvious answer, which is that Jotaro never actually expresses surprise about a rat being a stand user. I've even got a comment saying that Jotaro said that the rat proved animals could be stand users. I cannot stress enough that he's never said anything like this. The only line I could possibly see being construed as this is when he says, even though it's a rat, it must have developed a stand.
So he's not like shocked.
But that doesn't actually show him being surprised in any way. If he's surprised at all, it would be that a rat in particular got a stand, rather than a much more intelligent creature like a dog. In fact, in this line, he affirms that a rat must have developed a stand, despite having no concrete proof of that yet. The reason he has to clarify here that it got a stand even though it's a rat is because he's talking to Josuke, a person who doesn't know about animal stand users and who is surprised at their existence.
Yeah, he's very new to the whole scenario, isn't it? Yeah, it's not...
Now, I was at a loss on this until I decided to check out the English dub for the anime. Here, after describing the rat surviving the arrow, he says, "You know what that means. Humans aren't the only organisms with the potential to acquire stand abilities." After hearing this, I believe this is where people got this idea from. From the clunky way it's written, it could be interpreted that Jotaro is coming to the conclusion that animals are stand users for the first time. Of course, since the English dub often differs from the original dialogue, we can't take what it says as canon in any way. And in the original Japanese, no such confusion about Jotaro and animal stand users exists. Just as a rule of thumb for dub watchers, I recommend that you check the Japanese version or the manga to make sure the question you have isn't due to something the dub changed.
Yeah, I would always do that. If I was to watch an English version of something, like, ever since, right, there was a moment, when I went to uni all these years ago, I learned that there was a Japanese Transformers series called, it wasn't Super God Master Force, it was Headmasters. And I watched it dubbed and I didn't enjoy it. But then my mate Todd, who knew about the series, we watched it subbed. And then he mentioned something about how something was different in the dialogue. And so we went into the dub version and yeah, it's like you do get different conversations. So it is, if you've got a question about something, always go back to the opposite one and see if it answers it for you.
Next is one talking about the scene following Kira's introduction. They ask why when Kira walked past Josuke, he didn't just bump into him and turn Josuke into a bomb and kill him later. I find this odd since Kira actually has very little reason to go after Josuke here. He killed Shigechi because he learned his secret, but he avoided being seen by Josuke, so he simply didn't find it necessary to kill Josuke unprovoked. Now, Kira did learn from Shigechi that they were investigating the death of Reimi. However, as he says, once Shigechi is erased, there's no proof leading back to him. He didn't know that the button would end up acting as a clue to find him, or even that they had found it. Another important detail here is that while Kira doesn't directly get confirmation of this, he suspects that Josuke and Okuyasu are stand users. That's a pretty big reason not to try and initiate an attack here, since he doesn't have any idea what Josuke is capable of. And maybe most importantly, Kira's main motivation that drives his character is to live a quiet life.
Quiet life, yeah.
While he does have a powerful stand and could get away with killing a lot more people, he prefers to kill at his leisure.
Yeah, like it's a weird chilled out approach to being a bad guy. It's like, just leave me alone, I want to do what I want to do, but then it's like, but I want to be able to do it at the same time.
So I just don't think he has a real reason to kill Josuke here, which honestly might attract more suspicion than just leaving him alone. This next one isn't quite an Araki forgot, but more of a misunderstanding that I wanted to point out. I got a comment recently asking whether Superfly's user Toyohiro first developed his stand after living in the tower, or if he took it over from a previous user. I pointed out that it is actually his stand, which developed after he moved into the tower, trapping him. The reason this person was confused was because the JoJo Wiki says that there was a previous unknown user. This information, though, is actually incorrect, in part because it comes from the JoJo Wiki at fandom.com. This used to be the only JoJo Wiki, but in 2019, the main staff left since they were dissatisfied with fandom's policies and the obtrusive ads. So they made JoJoWiki.com, a far superior and better maintained wiki. The fandom one has rightfully fallen into disrepair and should be ignored at this point. Just as an example, many of its pages are incomplete, like anything related to Part 9 or the Rohan TV drama. And it doesn't even have a page acknowledging recent JoJo properties like the Phantom Blood musical. This Superfly error also doesn't exist on the better wiki. Whenever new pages do get added to the fandom wiki, they're also usually heavily plagiarized from the real JoJo wiki, so just stick to the more up-to-date wiki if you want more accurate information.
There you go,
on the
if you want your info.
Now we have a question related to Bites the Dust. The comment here is correcting me by saying that Bites the Dust doesn't actually rewind time by an hour like I say in the video, but that it actually rewinds time to the point that the bomb was planted. This is simply untrue. Near the end of the fight, Hayato directly says that the ability rewinds time by 1 hour, and if we go take a look at the JoJo Veller standbook, it says the same. However, this fact is actually demonstrated in the manga itself as well. For example, Rohan dies at 8:30 AM, and when Hayato is sent back to morning, it's 7:30. However, in the next loop, when Rohan dies automatically, time keeps going for a bit. The others die at 8:36, and when time rewinds, we can see that it's actually 7:36.
Oh, okay.
We can also see a clear difference between these times.
Oh, right, that's cool.
At 7:30,
so it is.
Hayato is in his pajamas and in bed, and later his mom comes in when he's dressed. When Hayato comes back at 7:36, he's already dressed, and Shinobu comes in right away since it's farther in the future. Not only that, but later we are shown a timeline with all of these points laid out. Now, as for the idea of time rewinding to when the bomb was planted, this was never suggested anywhere in the manga. This also wouldn't really make sense, since the bomb was actually planted on Hayato the night before alongside Kira awakening the ability, not in the morning.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
This next one is related to the Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan story, Mutsukabe Hill. For the uninitiated, this story involves a woman named Osato Naoko who accidentally kills her boyfriend Gunpei, after which his body starts endlessly leaking blood. Naoko has to constantly manage the body for years to dispose of the blood while keeping the body secret. We learn that Gunpei is actually a species of yokai whose death is the start of a new phase of life where they're cared for by the person who killed them. The final revelation is that Naoko actually sired children with the corpse, who are just like their father. This commenter asks how Rohan was able to immediately figure out that he had met Naoko's daughter when she died in front of him, and even knew that she was created by Naoko having children with Gunpei's corpse. There's a few things to consider here. First of all, Rohan knows all about Gunpei already, since he was investigating rumors of a being like him in the area, where he ran into Naoko and read the entire story from her with Heaven's Door.
There you go.
Second, Rohan was right outside Naoko's house at the time, and the daughter said that people like him have been snooping around lately, implying that she lives there. Finally, when she died, her body started to undergo the same transformation as Gunpei, letting Rohan know that she was one too and must be his daughter. For another Rohan chapter, I've actually seen a lot of confusion surrounding the very first chapter of the spin-off, A Confessional.
Oh.
I've seen some of this outside of my comment section as well. The different questions about this story actually conflict with each other, so I think I need to look at them one at a time. A lot of people ask why the servant was the one to be cursed at the end. This seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding a lot of people have with the chapter, which is surprising since this is directly related to the story's main twist. To recap, the main character, who I'll call the Confessor, is the one speaking to Rohan in the confessional booth. He was a selfish man who forced a beggar to work for food, leading to his death. The ghost of the beggar cursed him and said he would return at the peak of his happiness. Soon after, the man had incredible good luck and became extremely rich, and had a daughter. From the story's perspective, we see him out with his daughter when the ghost returns and possesses her. The ghost forces him to go along with his game of catching popcorn in his mouth, and when he eventually fails, he is killed. Of course, you might already notice the twist, which is that the Confessor never really died since he's telling Rohan the story.
Yeah.
He used his extravagant wealth to make his servant undergo plastic surgery to look just like him, which fooled the ghost. Now you might see the problem with the question. They ask why the servant was cursed at the end, but this isn't the servant, it's the Confessor, who also had plastic surgery and took the role of the servant, who we see briefly before the popcorn game. He's cursed by both the servant and the beggar for tricking them and confesses this sin to Rohan. Now another comment asks how the servant knew the whole story of his boss. It's hard to tell, but I think this person is asking how the servant was aware of the reason the ghost was haunting him. And others ask why he went along with the popcorn game when he really didn't do anything. However, if you look at the dialogue, the servant never actually says he knows about the ghost. In fact, he seems really confused about what's going on.
Right,
he
yeah, that makes more
repeatedly
sense.
questions why this is happening to him.
Oh, he says,
and
why me?
plays the
Yeah.
game since the ghost would kill him otherwise. I think it's clear from his ghost at the end that he did not know what was coming, since he says that he was tricked with money to undergo the surgery. Next is a Part 5 question related to the stand Notorious B.I.G.
Okay.
This comment says that since B.I.G. is made from flesh grown from Carne's severed fingers, then it should be a visible stand. This much is true. However, they say that after it fell in the ocean, it was no longer visible and people didn't know that it was attacking their ships. But this is not the case. In the narration in the manga, it is said that B.I.G. occasionally attacks and sinks passing boats. The local fishermen then said that the area was cursed, so it isn't the people who were actually attacked by B.I.G. that are saying this, since they die when their ships are sunk. It's the locals calling it a curse since boats keep sinking in that area, and they haven't actually seen the stand itself. Another question I've gotten many times is one related to the power of Requiem in Part 5.
Okay.
They say that the abilities of Requiem stands are tailored to fulfill your greatest desire at that moment, but that this conflicts with Polnareff's initial awakening of Chariot Requiem. Since we saw that Chariot Requiem's goal was to get the arrow away from Diavolo, and that's why it had that ability, it makes no sense for it still to be the same stand back when Polnareff first discovered it, and back then it should have been something different to fit his desires at that time. This one is confusing for me just from how widespread it is when there's really no reason to think this. But I just have to stress here that at no point was it ever said that that's what Requiem is. Requiem has simply never been defined as an ability that fulfills your wish when you get it. This seems to be a very prevalent headcanon reading of Requiem that has just seeped into general discussion of the power. Our only description of the nature of Requiem's power is that it gives you the ability to dominate the souls of all life. That's pretty general and does not at all mention it fulfilling your wish. I assume people get this idea because the two Requiem powers happen to do what was needed at the time.
Right?
But that isn't really a good way of defining the ability when Chariot Requiem had gone completely rogue and actually went against its user's wishes. The only time something like this was said was when Polnareff said that Chariot was carrying on his wish of keeping the arrow safe. However, Chariot Requiem had gone berserk and was completely out of Polnareff's control at that time.
It's just going crazy for anyone trying to get it.
Since the stand had no user, it acted on Polnareff's subconscious desire. But that's referring to Chariot's actions, not its ability. The Requiem ability that the stand has would be the same regardless of whether Polnareff was in control or not. And for Gold Experience Requiem, the power is way too complicated to just be narrowed down to saying it was made just to beat Diavolo. If that were the case, then the power could have been 100 different things and it wouldn't matter as long as it happened to fulfill Giorno's wish. I think one of the other reasons people think this is because of Bites the Dust in Part 4. In that case, Kira was pushed to his breaking point and the arrow was suddenly attracted to him, awakening a new ability that can perfectly conceal his identity. But we have to remember that Bites the Dust is not a Requiem stand, it's simply a new ability drawn out through the arrow. In Polnareff's case, his Requiem ability has always been to swap the souls of people, and in Giorno's case it would always have been to return things to zero. It doesn't have anything to do with when the power was awakened. This next question is related to the spin-off Purple Haze feedback. This is responding to an old question I covered asking how Sale and Zukuro were alive in the book when they both died back in Part 5. I pointed out that neither of them died and were both said to be alive and were knocked out back on the boat after the fight. Even Sale, who got shot in the head, was said by Mista to have survived.
Whoa, he's still alive. Yeah, I remember laughing about this. It's like he literally is like, "Ha, he is alive."
To freeze the bullet just in time. However, this comment says that Zukuro is definitely supposed to be dead. They say that Zukuro was decapitated and left decapitated all the way until Bucciarati died, after which the zippers would disappear and he would die. I don't know where this person got the idea that Zukuro remained decapitated though, since this was never stated at any point. They clearly did not intend to kill them, so I see no reason to believe why Bucciarati would leave Zukuro's head off. I assume what they may be saying is that even with the head reattached, the zipper would still remain, and once Bucciarati dies, it would go away and the head would fall off again. Like how Trish's zipper started disappearing when he first died.
Yeah, okay.
But we know that Sticky Finger's zippers don't have to stay forever. At one point, Abakio got his hand reattached using a zipper, and that zipper eventually went away and his hand stayed on. But this is even more simple since Zukuro's head was removed with the zipper in the first place. If the head was put back and zipped up, the zipper could disappear and the head would go back to normal. We know this is true since all the way back in his first ever appearance, Bruno was able to remove his own arm with a zipper and put it back with no problems. And of course, if we look at the anime adaptation, when they're knocked out on the boat, Zukuro's head is clearly reattached with no zipper present. This next question deals with part 6 and claims that it was never explained where the fragments of the stand arrow in Jolene's locket came from. They say that it's clearly a piece of Pulpo's arrow which we saw destroyed, but that it was never explained how the Speedwagon Foundation got it. I honestly don't see how this is supposed to be a plot hole of any kind. The Speedwagon Foundation was in possession of an arrow already, the one taken from Akira Otoishi, so they could have just gotten a fragment from that to send to Jolene. Also, saying it necessarily has to be Pulpo's arrow because it's the only one we saw broken is just a strange idea. Since that arrow wasn't simply broken apart, it was said to be destroyed beyond repair and became unusable after that point, so it clearly wasn't that arrow. The next question deals with part 7, specifically the fight with Wekapipo. They say that when left side corpse, so this one's between slowly strangest ones, although those are fun. What kind of game genres? Doorbell.
Okay, cool. I ain't getting spoiled. But yeah, wow, so boom. That's all the Debunking Araki Forgot extras. At the time of me recording this, number 11. But yeah, like I said, if you guys got anything else from the Hamon Beat channel that isn't going to spoil anything after Stone Ocean, then let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.
Click like and subscribe. Pixel Party Pals! Pixel Party Pals!